2012 was a very big year for the LGBT community, and to talk about some of the biggest stories of the year, we have with us Matthew Bajko of San Francisco's Bay Area Reporter. Matthew, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, I heard someone the other day in Cafe Flore say, wow, 2012 was the most important year for LGBT issues ever. You think that's true?
Quite possibly, because it definitely was a historic year. For the first time, we saw a sitting president voice support for same-sex marriage. He went on to win re-election. So it goes to show that that issue is not the death knell for a politician. Obviously, we're waiting to see what the United States Supreme Court does with the lawsuits, both here from California's ban against gay marriage and the Federal Defense of Marriage Act. So I think it was a really big year nationally. You know, we saw the first lesbian elected to the United States Senate. Here in California, we're seeing one of the largest groups of LGBT elected officials be sworn in December to the State House. And locally, there's been many stories that we've been covering all year long.
So it was kind of a lavender wave in a sense, this last election.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think every year is going to be a big LGBT year because we're out there and our stories are getting a lot more attention by the mainstream press as well.
Right.
So
now, how long have you been writing for the Bay Area Reporter?
Since 2001.
Right. Now, has it surprised you, the arc of the last 12 years? I mean, the amount of stories and just kind of the change in the LGBT civil rights landscape?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely, I think, see the trends. When I first started, I think AIDS and AIDS coverage was a far more large part of what I was writing about: STDs, drug use, nighttime issues. Now you've seen we're covering LGBT aging and seniors a lot more. The gay marriage issue was not on anyone's radar back in 2001.
It wasn't on the radar at all in 2001.
Yeah, so and now that's become the biggest story of the last decade, really. And it's also, you know, brought issues up within the community itself about assimilationist. And, you know, when the gay rights movement started, no one was thinking that they wanted to be a straight heterosexual married couple. I mean, that just wasn't thought about or talked about much. And now, you know, you see younger LGBT people that's what they see as the norm of what they can achieve in their lives. I think it's a really powerful change that we've witnessed, even though some people may not want to get married themselves. Just the ability to be an equal American citizen is huge.
And the fact that it's actually on the table to talk about.
Yeah.
Now, the Bay Area Reporter is, correct me if I'm wrong, the oldest LGBT newspaper in the country?
Continuously publishing.
Continuously published, so it's been around for 35 years now.
Since 1971.
Right. How much do stories that start in the Bay Area Reporter, and I'm specifically talking about the last couple of years, and this last year, 2012, impact quote-unquote mainstream news coverage? I mean, for instance, when I first came to San Francisco in the early, mid-'80s, you would see stories in the Bay Area Reporter that you would see nowhere else. I mean, it was like if you wanted a certain slant or a certain type of coverage, you had to get the BAR. And now what I'm seeing, and correct me if I'm wrong, are sometimes stories that you guys break and that the mainstream news picks up.
Well, I think that's been going on for many years now with a lot of the country's main LGBT newspapers. It's not specific to us here in San Francisco, but you'll see this happening in Chicago with the Windy City Times, in D.C. with the Washington Blade, and in Boston, Bay Windows. You've got the Georgia Voice in Atlanta, the Dallas Morning News down there in Texas. I mean, we all are on the ground reporting, have our sources, breaking news that maybe it doesn't get picked up right away by the mainstream press, but they watch certainly what we're reporting on. And what I've been told by particularly television reporters is that it's easier for them to pitch a story to their news assignment desk if they can come in with, see, the BAR is covering it, it's important, we
have
should
to,
cover
because
it.
that's a big part of our viewership.
Yeah, and that's what they do with the Chronicle too. So if the Chronicle has a story in the paper, you'll see the TV stations kind of following that because they know that's a big story.
Yeah, I mean, I once had a TV producer at a local affiliate joke with me when I said to him, so what's your day like? He said, oh, my job is I read the paper and then I decide what's going on TV that night. So TV does follow print.
You know, when Hank Plant was at CBS's local affiliate, he always made sure that the BAR was delivered to their newsroom so that his colleagues could read it, and that it would help. You know, he covered a lot of stories, and when, you know, he would watch what we were reporting on, and would, you know, it would turn into some great TV news for him. I think one of the best examples of that is that I was able to get San Jose's mayor on the record that he does not support gay marriage, and he had never really been asked the question. And it just so happened that he showed up for a press event with our then mayor, Gavin Newsom, 5 blocks from our offices. So I just walked right down, introduced myself to him, asked the question, broke the news, and then Hank, that Thursday night, I saw Hank went down to San Jose, found him, got him on TV, and started asking him some more questions. And it was really great to see, you know, and Hank had sent me a nice email about, hey, you know, this was a good job for you. And, you know, I always thought Hank did a great job on getting stuff because he, you know, back in the day, just like the BAR, he was one of the few people getting AIDS stories on TV.
Absolutely. And of course, I mean, Hank Plant, one of the first, if not the first, openly gay TV reporter now in Palm Springs, and still doing some great reporting down there from Palm Springs.
Yeah.
Well, now you talked about that story that you broke, you know, years ago when the San Jose mayor came out as being opposed to same-sex marriage. For this last year, 2012, what were some of the big stories? And I guess maybe end with the biggest, but maybe do the top 5 stories that the BAR found most newsworthy.
Well, I think one of the stories that we were covering from the get-go was on the AIDS funding cuts. You know, the city, because of the way that they parcel out the funds in D.C., was facing millions of dollars this year, and we covered that from January through probably June as the budget cycle was going. And you know, we had the mayor and the supervisors all saying that they were going to find a way to backfill those cuts. If they hadn't, it would have been devastating for the city's AIDS service industry.
I mean, there literally would have been people living with AIDS out on the streets, correct?
Well, I don't know about that, but it would have been, there'd be less services because there's just not enough funds in the, you know, unless the private sector stepped up to backfill it, without that city funding, there would have been a real cutback in AIDS nonprofit agencies. So that was huge. And, you know, we're looking at that again. That's going to be another story because in the 2013-14 budget cycle, there's going to be another federal cut of almost $8 million, and we're going to be looking to see what happens. So it's an ongoing story, unfortunately. Perhaps with the Democrats taking full control up in Sacramento, that might be a good thing. With the voters in November passing the sales tax increase and taxes on the rich, you're seeing, you know, the fiscal situation improve locally and statewide. And we're beginning, you know, it all depends on what happens with this fiscal cliff. If Congress and the president does not come up with a deal to avoid that, there's going to be a lot of heartbreak within the AIDS community because they're going to get funding cuts.
So this story is still continuing.
Yeah, so that's been one of the bigger stories this year.
Now, what do you think have been some of the stories or the one story that you thought, wow, will this story just go away? A story that you thought maybe got too much attention?
Well, obviously, it's nudity. And I find it funny when I hear people complaining about the media's obsession with nudity. Well, the media didn't create this. It was the actual community that has been obsessed with this for 2 years now. And, you know, I kind of like to tell people that, you know, think of a newspaper as a menu at a restaurant. A restaurateur is going to look and see what people are ordering. And if there's an item on that menu that nobody's ordering, they're going to 86 it. And the one that, you know, everybody wants, they're gonna find ways to give it to you. So nudity is that story. I mean, we've now have a letters page again. I mean, nonstop letters about nudity. You go onto our website, the Chronicle's website, any TV website that's been covering this, the comments just run into the hundreds on some of these sites with people going back and forth on Facebook, on social media. I mean, it's been a big story and one that frankly, we tried to avoid covering it because there are a lot more important stories out there. But at a certain point, when it becomes what everyone is talking about and there's demands that City Hall take action, it is going to become a big news story.
Right. Now, conversely, has there been a story this year that you felt as a reporter, I know you cover politics and, write about stories that would not be covered by the Chronicle or mainstream news that are important to the LGBT community. Has there been a story, or is there a story that you wished would get more play, or that you would like to see get more coverage, that you think is really important to the community?
Well, I think what is driving these conversations about AIDS services and the nudity and the other kind of stories that seem to get a lot of attention are, the flagpole and the giant rainbow flag in the Castro, benches at Harvey Milk Plaza. It comes down to people's fears of what the Castro is shaping into and its identity of being a gay neighborhood recognized worldwide. It's a story that's been ongoing. We've covered it a lot over the years, but the key story that I've been covering for 6 years is development. And, I broke this kind of 6 years ago about how more than a dozen parcels up along Market Street were set to be turned into housing.
Right, because now it seems to me that there's more residential development going along in the Market Street corridor than I remember over the last 15, 20 years.
And what happened is just as those projects were in the pipeline, the fiscal hit and the economy went down. There was no funding from the banks to build these houses. Well, all of those, meanwhile, got approved, and we're just sitting there waiting for a bank to give them a loan. Well, in the last year, at least 6 sites now, from Octavia by the LGBT Community Center all the way up to Castro and 16th.
Right across from Cafe Flora.
Yeah,
right.
There are major developments going on. And what this is going to do to the community and who's going to move into those rental units is going to shape the Castro for decades to come.
Right. We've got about 30 seconds left. In our final moments, tell us what's the biggest story you think you'll be covering in 2013.
Well, I think who's living in the Castro and the stores that open there, and also HIV positive issues as well as senior issues. Those are the top stories we're going to be probably covering.
We'll have you back next year to talk about those.
Okay.
Thank you. We've been speaking with Matthew Bajko of the Bay Area Reporter. Next up, celebrating 2 decades of Kung Pao kosher Jewish comedy with Lisa Geduldig. We'll be right back.